YouTube as well.
Let's do the Nader hood pose. Wait, ears out, right? Ears. I mean, ears out outside the hood, right?
I don't know. I feel like it's a vibe, bro. I feel like it's a move.
Bro, ears in.
No, but if you put your ears in, you can't hear what's going on. You know what I'm saying?
I can hear perfectly. Alhamdulillah.
We are live.
I'm hard of hearing.
Are you opening the link right now? What?
What's your question?
What?
Speak louder, Doug.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, Taha, are you updating the link right now?
I'm about to, yeah.
All right, we're live.
Ooh, baby, we live.
I think we're all in the.
Mehdi, did you get your homework done today? Or you're skipping?
Speak louder, Doug.
Can you hear me?
Sorry. Wait, no, that's not me. Okay.
I don't know. How's that horchata?
I haven't tried it yet. This is coffee.
Bro,
The horchata has evaporated milk, so I need my lactate pills, which are in my car. So I'm gonna wait until this is over, just in case.
Or you can be a rebel and just drink it.
All right.
I can eat my pizza right now. I'm really
The
tempted.
link is updated.
Cool.
welcome, guys.
We have 3 people
got-
watching. Like those 3 people are us, so.
We got some more. We got some more.
I'm about to post them on.
Yeah, let's post.
Oh, wait, I don't think it's updated. 1 second. After we log in.
Well, Tahashirama, you had one job.
It's all good. Take your time.
Actually, he has multiple jobs. One of those jobs is reciting Taraweeh. Another one is doing homework. Another one is figuring out Ramadan radio. So let's not be insensitive here, okay?
Sorry, Nader. What'd you say?
You didn't hear me?
No, please.
I love the support, Nader. You're a real one.
I got you, Taha. I got you.
We loved your flyer, Nader.
Thank you. Everyone did, but you. You're a hater, Aisa.
I just said I loved your flyer. This guy.
Okay,
I
now it's
said I
updated.
loved your flyer.
I don't understand it sometimes. Wallah, you try to be kind to him, and he pushes back.
I know.
And
I'm saying I
It's a
love your
love-hate
flyer. He's,
relationship.
like, yelling at
Are
me.
you guys talking about Nader or QN?
He's talking about Nader, man.
Nadia, I really like your mug, by the way. It's very cute.
My mug?
No,
Oh,
Nadia's mug.
QN.
what mug, man.
Explain to me how it's cute. Please explain to me how the mug is cute.
It's cute because it's black and it's
Oh
made
my
of.
god.
How
It
is that?
just has a nice aesthetic to it. I think it's cute.
It's pleasing to the eye, but how is it cute?
Cute.
Ugh.
Do we really have to explain this?
Oh,
Just
here
let
we
it
go.
be.
Yeah, please Nader.
Nah, no one thinks he's cute. It's okay, you guys. Alas, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Definition of cute: clever or cunning, especially in a self-seeking or superficial way. I don't think that mug is clever or cunning.
Has it occurred to you
What-
that
why?
the mug is superficial?
Are you
Um,
true.
telling me that my mug is superficial?
Perhaps.
I mean, I'm just saying it's not cute.
All right. You guys ready for
To get started. We're at 10 people.
a meaningful conversation today, or
I'm excited. Today's gonna be a good talking.
Yo, QN, can I ask you a question?
Inshallah.
Kind of regarding culture versus religion.
oh no. All right, go
My
ahead.
mom is curious.
Uh-oh.
What is the rule of whistling in Islam?
The rule of what?
The
Whis-
whistling. Because she's like,
The
I'm next.
whistling?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Make sure you ask him. I was like, yes, ma'am.
Is it because you whistle or because she whistles?
My sister whistles. I also whistle, but not as frequently.
I don't know how to whistle. It's interesting.
Yeah, you know, the whistling. What do I say? Yeah, you've heard people say things like, whistling, you invite the shaitan, and what else do you guys hear about whistling? And I think this is going to be a cool. I think that we should save this because it's going to be part of like, hey, what are some things that you were told growing up that were totally cultural, but we thought that were Islamic? I think that would.
that you still think that are religious, but some people believe that are cultural. Maybe.
Sorry.
Okay, I'll save it. As long as it's answered, as long as they yell at me during Sahur, I'm
Yeah.
okay.
So,
I just realized my name is still
I guess let's just start. I mean, what are we? We got
20 people.
waiting.
Should we get started?
Everybody send it to your WhatsApp groups. You know,
Can I-
I'm gonna plug it. Right now.
Can I ask everybody who's watching to sort of drop a salam and where they're watching from?
My basement.
I can't.
Is that it?
No, like, come on, like, we don't want to know.
I feel like, okay.
in Illinois, like, just like where you're watching from. Are you like
Yeah,
Wisconsin?
some people might be watching from different
Greenfield or
countries. You never know.
Brookfield? Nope.
True.
What's your deets, man? Wa alaikum salam. Taha Tayyibi from Gurney.
Hiba, hover over your little tile thing, and then there's the 3 dots, and then it says rename.
I'm on the online version, so I actually can't do that. But
You want me to rename for
You
you?
want me to rename you?
yes, please.
Oh, actually, I can't even rename you. I
You
forgot.
want me to rename you to Hiba Ali?
That's awkward.
Yeah, that's fine.
I just said salam watching
You have to get the bottom screen.
What'd she say?
from Japan.
Yo, are my glasses super reflective, or does it mean like they're reflecting?
Oh, they're really reflective.
Yeah. What you do is just lower the brightness on your screen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because it's really super bright.
Lighting that you had told you, you don't have to hold it directly in front of your face.
So we have something from the Bronx. Jayan.
No, he's not from.
Look, man, this is what I'm talking about. We got people throwing in the salams from Franklin, Wisconsin. We got from Gurney, Illinois, Japan. Allahu Akbar.
She's not
Japan.
from.
She's not from Japan.
I know.
She's not.
Hey, man, she wants to be in Japan. All right. From Gurney, we got some of Taha's boys here. Nice. From the Bronx, mashallah. From Greendale, from Franklin, from New Berlin. We got some Greendale. We got someone from the Shamut household.
All right, I think we're about at 30 participants, so maybe we
Yeah,
can
they're from Planet
kind of
Mars.
get started. Inshallah, in a second.
That probably is what, Plainfield, Illinois? Cornfield, Illinois? Plainfield, Illinois. All right. Morton Grove.
That was a good one.
From the Red Cities. That's a good one.
I'm from Brookfield, Wisconsin, bro. Stop hating.
Fozzy's in the house. Fozzy, what's up, bro? Salam, Fozzy.
All right, Garrett.
Man, Puzzle's luck.
Fozzo's log, baby.
Bye, I'm on.
All right.
All right, cool. We should get started. Inshallah, we're about 30 people.
Yeah, just,
So, assalamu alaikum, everybody.
close, guys.
Inshallah, today we're going to be talking about culture versus Islam. And I guess to kind of start us off, we wanted to kind of talk about how we can differentiate these two. So how can we essentially differentiate culture versus religion, and how can we confuse them in our day-to-day lives? So anyone want to kind of tackle this and give an example of that? You can go for it.
I think it kind of it's each person, depending on where they're from, where they're taught different morals and different things like that from their parents and grandparents. Things like that. But and I think it really depends on that, like what you're taught and what your sources are. If your sources go back to your parents and their grandparents, and there's no, like, I guess, serious like form of like scholar, or the information is not coming from some sort of scholar, then I feel like very likely it'll end up being something kind of cultural. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think you definitely bring up a good point. It does depend on like the circumstances and your experience in general.
I think most cultural aspects that we get in our life are passed down from our parents. Most, if not all. We do take a lot of things from our parents, and also religion. You know, the people pray in different ways. You know, whether people, like, you know, do their shahada when they're doing tashahhud in a different way, or whether it's when you come up for you know, everybody prays in a slightly different way. You know, and all that stems from your family, really. And I feel like both culture and religion are have a nature aspect to them, and nurture.
Yeah, I agree. That makes sense.
This is a little bit more of a complicated, like I'm trying to think of an answer to this question and it's a little bit complicated. But the way that I see it is Islam in general, it's not just a faith, it's a way of life, right? Like other faiths are not really ways of life. Like Christianity, people just go to church once a week and they call it a day. Whereas Islam is a way of life, an outward way of living, like from your dress to your actions to the way you speak to the way you talk to the way you enter the bathroom, things like that. So it's hard because culture is also a way of living. So because you have two conflicting ways of living your life, they tend to sometimes overlap, and we tend to sometimes mistake one for the other. So that's sort of my take on that a little bit.
I think that definitely makes sense, especially when it comes to cultural traditions, things that we do in our different cultures, like that can kind of clash with what our beliefs and like what our values hold true for our religion. So I think that's a definitely really good point to bring up.
Yeah, this is kind of a hard question. Sorry.
Yeah. No, go for it. What else do you think?
There's just a very thin line between the two, in my opinion. So it's kind of hard to truly define what's culture and what's religion. So I'm just like, I don't know, man.
Yeah, it is kind of hard to differentiate like where the lines end essentially. So I guess to kind of go off of that, just being able to distinguish the two, what is essentially problematic about the relationship between them? So how can they like clash? What are some examples of how these two things can kind of come into contact with each other?
Can I, before we move on, can I say something?
Go for it.
Got your, you guys, now that I got your permission, bro?
Of course, you always.
All right. So I wanted to just bring up real quickly this concept of culture and whether it's something that is Islamic or not. So culture actually, unlike what we most of the time think, has nothing to do with Islam. But that's not true. Our scholars actually have written about culture. In Arabic, the concept of culture is known as urf. Okay, what does urf mean? And those of you who know Arabic, what does urf mean? What does arafa mean? Arafa or urf, or to know, right?
To know.
Urf means something that's cultural or something that's known, something that's culturally accepted. That's the urf, right? When you're, there's different urfs in America, right? You go to different states, there's a different urf of how you dress and how you, what type of car you drive, for example, right? There's different urfs in different states. So the scholars talk about this concept of urf and this concept of culture. And they say, look, there's nothing wrong with culture. As long as culture is within the confines of halal, right? As long as you're not making something halal haram and something haram halal, right? As long as you're not doing that, culture is totally acceptable. Culture is actually extremely important, right? Culture is what adds flavor and value in your existence, right? Life becomes very bland without culture. Now the question comes, what culture do we follow, and what type of culture do we follow? And so let's put that in perspective first, that culture is not a good or a bad thing, because culture can have good, can be bad, and there can be really, really nasty things in culture as well. I mean, all cultures have the good, the bad, and the really, really nasty and ugly aspects of it. And so when I look at culture, and I look at at least from our tradition, you look at culture, you look at even our books of fiqh, of jurisprudence, you find that a lot of rulings in Islam are actually based on culture. Like the scholars will give you a fatwa in regards to something based on what the cultural practice of the place you live is. So, for example, the dressing is a very, very it's a topic that we'll come to when it comes to culture, the aspect of what's Islamically permissible to wear. Like, is it a cultural thing or is it a religious thing? So in certain places, a t-shirt, for example, right? Is it permissible to pray in a t-shirt or not? The question could come up. And I'm just giving a very, very simple, easy question, just to get our minds sort of moving and our, thoughts. If you had gone to India or the subcontinent, or even like Arab countries, and you were praying in a t-shirt, the scholars would say this is makruh. To pray with your arms exposed is makruh. Like, you shouldn't be praying in a t-shirt, something that you don't necessarily would go out with, right? But when we look at our own culture here, the t-shirt is a norm. Like, we go to work with the t-shirt, we go out with the t-shirt, we go buy groceries with this t-shirt. The t-shirt's a very, very common dress code in our culture. Now, is it makruh? Is it disliked for me to pray in a t-shirt? Is it disliked for me for my elbows to be showing in my prayer when that's sort of the culture of how we dress here? And the answer to that is no. No, it's not makruh, because in our culture, it's a normal dress code. It's part of the dress code. As long as it's covering the aura, it's totally cool, it's all good. And so culture, again, has the amazing aspects of it, and then it has the really challenging aspects of it. And I always tell people, and I say this in some of my talks in my khutbahs as well. I think that we're at a crossroads right now, and all of us are a little bit confused. Most of us are first generation Muslims, and so we're at this crossroads, and we're really confused on what is my American Muslim culture. What's my Muslim American culture? Is my Muslim American culture Syrian? Is my Muslim American culture Indian or Pakistani, or is it Palestinian? What is it? What is it? What is my Muslim American culture? And I think that's what we're going to discuss, and we need to figure out. We're at this crossroads. Yes, ABCD, right? American born, confused desi, right? That's where we are. A lot of us, we're just trying to figure out, like, where do we belong? Where do we fit in all of this here? And so it's important for us to now have this important conversation so that we, as a first generation I'll take this back. A lot of us are first generation Muslims, but Islam existed in America way before we got here. And I think this is a discussion that we can have. I'm just throwing this out because I want this to be part of the conversation. We immigrants, we first generation Muslims in America, actually think that we are the ones that are going to establish Muslim American culture, when Muslim American culture has actually already been established by Muslims that have been living here for centuries, right? The African American community have been here, Muslims who've lived here, who've worshipped here way before our parents and our grandparents even moved here. So they've already established our Muslim American culture. But for a lot of us, we, Arab, Desi, whatever other ethnicity you want to add to this, I'm only saying Arab and Desi because that's majority of our ethnicities here. We have a sense of feeling that our ethnicity or our culture is superior to the culture of the African American Muslims. You see what I'm saying? And so there's a sense of racism that exists in this, and this is a whole different topic altogether that we can maybe use for a different episode or conversation. But anyway, so I wanted to just throw those thoughts out there, get people's minds working, and maybe have a meaningful and controversial conversation, inshallah.
Wait, quick question. So just so I'm not mistaken, Noel asked, is the term makruh involved with Islam or culture? And then I said makruh is typically Islamic, relating to something that's not explicitly haram but looked down upon.
Yeah, so makruh is a Islamic term. It's a term that we use in books of jurisprudence, of fiqh. Something that is haram, we all know it's haram. You have different levels, right? So you have haram, the level of haram. Then you have the level of makruh, which is something that's disliked. And then even the makruh has like different stages. Like you have makruh tahrimi, which is like almost haram. And then you have makruh tanzihi, which is like, okay, not almost haram, but it's just disliked. You should try to avoid it. And then you have something that's known as mabah. Mabah is permissible, something that's permissible. Then you have something that is mustahab or mandub, which is preferable, which is encouraged. Then you have something which is sunnah, which was what the Prophet did and we're encouraged to do. Then you have the wajib. You know what the wajib is? It's not fard necessarily, but it's almost fard. It's like you have to do it. So for the Hanafis who pray witr, the 3 witr that we pray, the Hanafis, it's wajib. Like we have to make qada of that witr if you don't pray it. And then you have fard, which is like on the other side of haram, or halal, you know, the other side of impermissible. You have fard, which is mandatory or obligatory. So these are different stages where we will take different actions and sort of put them in this spectrum here. Where does something fit? Is it haram? Is it halal? Is it fard? Is it, you know, makruh or wajib? What is it?
I think that's really important to bring up what you said earlier, Qari Noman. Something that I wanted to kind of comment on is the fact that, you know, Islam is one of the most like diverse religions out there, which is really, really amazing to see, alhamdulillah. But I think what's also interesting to kind of understand is that the fact that we even have like different cultures to begin with, and it could have been, you know, like something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that we can kind of learn from each other and kind of appreciate each other's cultures, and just to kind of know how to communicate in that sense, and not have like a specific worldview, like an us versus them sort of mentality. And I also just wanted to kind of say that, going off what you said about like that sense of like nationalism can be sort of like racist within our own religion, which is really unfortunate. But at the same time, you know, cultures can kind of create a sense of community almost, or a sense of family. So for instance, like if you are from, you know, for instance, like I'm from Palestine. So when I come here and I see there's like an Arabic store and like there's a Palestinian person who like runs it, it kind of creates a sense of community, even though, you know, you might kind of, like you exactly said, like you're a Muslim, but you're also American, and you're trying to figure out with your other cultural identity how to mix those two together. So I guess just kind of like finding that balance can be very difficult. But in terms of that subtle racism, how can we kind of address that when cultures are intrinsically racist and they kind of have this us versus them mentality? How can we kind of tackle that? What do you guys think? It's kind of a big question.
I honestly think
I got quite a bit to say.
I honestly think that really needs a whole episode on its own.
Yeah.
The concept of
There's so much to say on it.
With this topic in general, there's just so much you can cover, because culture hits like everything. And like the biggest thing, or what I think is the biggest issue, there's nothing wrong with being, you know, proud of your culture, or being, you know, involved in your culture. It just becomes a problem when your culture is more important to you than your religion. You know, like you prefer to be around people of your own culture more than people of your own religion. Like I think that like I said before, there's a very thin line between them, but there shouldn't be equal on the scale. At least I don't. If anyone disagrees, like go for it. But I think that religion should take a much larger priority in terms of how you act and how you treat people and everything, you know, in between that. And then with like the whole like cultural racism, I think it's called colorism or culturism. Pretty sure it's colorism, but that in itself,
you're good.
Like there's racism within cultures, and then there's racism between cultures, and it's just a huge mess. Like the whole nationalistic pride, where like I'm Pakistani, for those who do not know, and how there are some, you know, Pakistanis who bash on Arabs, and then vice versa. Or like even I've heard this a lot, and high key, it's really annoying. It's like, oh, how are you? You're not Pakistani. You're too what? You're definitely Arab. Like you look too Arab to be Pakistani, bro. What does that mean? Like that doesn't make any sense. And I don't know. Like I can go on a whole rant about the colorism, the culturism, nationalism, all that stuff. I'm gonna let someone else speak though, because I think we should save that, or I should save that for later, because I will not shut up otherwise. But I think it's a huge problem within our ummah. We're not supposed to put our culture and like who we are nationalistically. First of all, no offense, but like all these countries didn't even exist until like how many years ago? You know what I'm saying? Like countries, they're literally just borders we put on land, and we called it a country, we called it a culture, and called it a day. So, I mean, I know obviously that's not the case for like big overlapping things, but most countries are very similar, especially Muslim countries are very similar. So, yeah, that's my
That is really true. I just wanted to kind of bring up that question because Qari Noman kind of touched on it, and I didn't want to completely like ignore it because it is such a big part of this discussion. And of course, like it can have its own topic, but just so we kind of addressed it a little bit and didn't necessarily throw it under the bus or the rug or whatever. I guess just kind of going off of one of the previous questions, what are like some examples of how culture and religion can kind of clash together, and what can we do in those situations to kind of find the best solution, I guess?
Sorry, I'm looking at the comments here.
Oh, that's fine.
before I answer your question, before we can get to your question, I'd
Go
love
for it.
me answer one of these comments here. So Safra says that it's fine as long as you don't look down upon others. Yes. There's nothing wrong with culture. There's nothing wrong with being cultural as long as you don't feel superior, or or you don't have the superior complex, at least, that you're better than other people. So yeah, it's totally fine to be inclined towards your own people. I want you to think, however, about and all those who are listening in, how our situation is very different than the situation back home. Like, go to India, everyone's Indian. Go to Pakistan, everyone's Pakistani. Go to Syria, everyone's Syrian. Go to everyone's from the same place. Everyone's like majority at least. I mean, here we're like in this melting pot, or as some call it, the salad bowl. Salad bowl. So we're in this melting pot or salad bowl, whatever you want to call it. We're all different. We all have different backgrounds. We all have different places where our parents came from. And so the question really comes up then, how much of culture do we hold on to? And I guess because we're still first generation, we're still figuring that out. And I can't say that I have the answer to that. I can say I'm confident or content with my understanding of how to differentiate between Islam and culture, and where culture is acceptable and where it isn't acceptable. I can understand that. However, is the way that we practice Islam now, or the culture that we're from, going to be the predominant way of how we will, or our kids or our grandkids or our generations will live in America? Or are they going to have to go through that struggle of trying to figure it out because we couldn't do it? You know what I'm saying? Are they going to have that struggle of trying to be like, okay, or are they going to have that identity crisis? I think this is a good point, because we have an identity crisis. A lot of us are confused. We are facing an identity crisis, not just with our faith, by the way. It's not just a faith identity crisis that we have. It's actually an identity crisis of who the hell are we, right? Who are we, right? Am I first an American, or am I first a Palestinian? Am I first American, or am I first Indian? And you'll have people arguing both sides. Some who will say no. Some will say you're Palestinian first, don't forget. Or you're Pakistani first, don't ever forget that. And you're like, no, I think I'm American. Look, I'm born and raised here. Yeah, my parents are from there. I love the place. I'd visit it anytime I want to, and anytime I can. And inshallah, we get to visit places soon after all this is over. But like, do I, or am I still considered to be first Palestinian or Syrian? And I think that's the question to ask. And I'm not saying either is a right or wrong. I'm saying some people who have a stronger attachment to their homeland may have the sense of nationalism, or a sense of, connection. I remember back in the day, sorry, I speak a lot too, sorry. I'm going to pick on Nader now again, like always.
I know what you're going to say right now. I already know.
Yeah, your wristband. You still have it on, man? All right, so I remember, like, this was like 7 years ago. Nader came into the Hifz class with his Syrian band on. He's all, yeah, I'm Syrian, man, alhamdulillah. So I was like, man, bro, take that off, man. Take it off. It's all good, man. I know you're Syrian. Alhamdulillah. I love Syria. I love the people of Sham. People of Sham are amazing. The scholars of Sham are amazing. The people of Sham are beautiful. So I mean, the question, the reason I wanted that to be a teaching moment was, hey, listen, before you're Syrian, you're a Muslim, right? Before you're Syrian and you're a nationalist, or your nationalism, or whatever comes in the way, I want you to know that you're a Muslim. Like, you're not Syrian before you're a Muslim, and I'm not Indian before I'm Muslim. I want you to understand that, and that your culture shouldn't be your culture, and your ethnicity shouldn't be the defining characteristic in your life. Like, you're Muslim, bro. You're Muslim before you're Syrian or Palestinian, and that we forget at times. So anyway, I spoke a lot, but there's a lot of things brewing here, and I'll throw it out after I give you guys a chance to talk, inshallah.
I'm so happy that you said everything that you did, because I have had that issue too. I mean, I'm pretty sure we all did when we're growing up and we're at school. It's like, well, are we actually American or are we Desi? And in my house, I'm gonna pick on my dad. I hope he doesn't watch this, but it's okay. I'll tell him to his face too. But I remember once we got in an argument and he's like, I'm either gonna raise you as an American or as a Desi. You can't have best of both worlds. And I remember just sitting there and I asked him, I said, well, why not? Don't you want the best for me? And then he told me stop twisting my words. And I said, okay, sorry. And it's just something that moment has resonated with me quite a bit because I think not only us, our parents kind of go through that crisis too, because they're like, how are we going to raise our kids? The other thing I wanted to mention that I was thinking of, we did kind of mention the topic of race, but the other issue that we kind of ignore or we just kind of shy away from is also sexism definitely exists in the culture, and it's so hard because I'm just going to speak as a Pakistani woman. Alhamdulillah, I'm going to say that my mother's side, they're very progressive in the way that they're thinking. My grandparents, every time they see me, they're like, are you a doctor yet? They're like, you're not getting married until you're a doctor or whatever successful job that you want to be, because they said that your self-worth isn't from another man, it comes from what you do. And I come to that. I am so grateful that that's the environment I was brought up in. But I also have some friends who they get married at a very early age, or some of them give up their careers that they don't want to just because their families had told them, you need to get married because that's just how it is. And I just think that's so appalling because our Islam does not teach us that. I mean, one of my heroes growing up and always will be is Khadija radiallahu. I mean, she was her own businesswoman and she was just amazing in every single way. Inshallah, like we can all strive to be like her in every way possible. But that's just something I wanted to throw out there because I did not want to let that go because I know that at least for the women over here, we definitely are impacted by that.
Facts, big facts.
So,
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for sharing.
I was gonna address the Surfraz comment. Surfraz, I love you. You know you're my guy. But he said, I think it's fine as long as you don't look down on others. And he said, I think it's normal to be inclined towards people of your own culture. And to an extent, I agree with this. But at the same time, there's a level of you can't just be in your comfort zone the whole time. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're a Muslim person, especially, as Qari Noman mentioned, your culture is Islam. You should not just be comfortable just speaking to, like limiting yourself to people of your own culture, because at that point, there's so many other people that you don't get to know. There's so many other people from different cultures who are also Muslim that you're not getting to, experience your own culture. Like, alhamdulillah, I went, when I was with Qari Noman in Hifz school, I went to a predominantly Desi masjid. And through that Desi masjid, I was able to meet so many Desi friends, and like the Desi culture is like second nature to me. Like I know so many like Desi words, and yeah, the ones that Qari Sub called me classmate. But yeah, and he basically like runs through my blood, you know what I'm saying? But it's important to get to know different cultures, and it's important to not limit yourself and try to be safe or try to be comfortable. And also I want to address the bracelet thing. I know, Faisal, you went to as a learning.
I gotta answer it. It's okay, bro. I wasn't coming at you. I was just using it as an example.
I know you're not, but I think it's also important to realize that yes, your first culture is Islam, and your first priority should always be Islam. But at the same time, like it's okay to have sort of like memorandums of your own culture. You know what I'm saying? Because we need to sort of preserve, or we need to have a sort of passion to our countries, because they're going through a lot of stuff right now. Like Palestine, unfortunately, is getting what the Jews are doing over there, or the Yahud. And like,
yeah. I mean, I guess to respond to something that Nader said, Safraz has a good point too, because in the Arabic proverb, al-jinsu yamilu ila jinsihi, it's a very natural thing. Al-jinsu yamilu ila jinsihi is one kind of something is always going to be attracted to its whatever its similar component. People from the same background are generally going to be attracted to people that they're, because there's a comfort level there. There's a comfort level there. Yes, it takes time to get out of your comfort zone. That's a different aspect and there's a different discussion. But generally, you feel comfortable around the people that speak the same language as you, or that look very similar, or have the same cultural habits as you. Why? Because you won't be judged. You feel like you won't be judged, at least. I won't be judged if I'm eating whatever with my hands, because this is a cultural norm of someone, right? For example, like if I'm eating like full out biryani with my hands and some white dude sees me like, look at this animal. right? And I'd be like, no, man, this is the sunnah. Like I'm eating with my hands. It's not only sunnah, but it's also cultural and whatever else, right? And so that's important. Now I do have a question though, off of your bracelet, and I think this. So now let's say that I'm Indian, right?
Yeah.
Is it like, I don't know, is it cool for me to like rock a Indian flag on my car, or have an Indian flag bracelet? I say this because then y'all gonna be like, well, why you come from Modi land and this and that, and why are you being patriotic, right? So is it okay for me to wear something that wear a band that that is of my country, even though my country isn't a quote unquote Muslim country, although probably has a larger Muslim population than a lot of Muslim countries in the world? Would it be okay for me? And would you guys, and would people in general be cool with, hey, this guy's rocking, like I'm an imam, I'm rocking a Indian flag, got a little Indian flag stitched on my thobe too. Like, would that be cool? I'm saying.
That's a good question.
I mean, I don't think Nathan has the Syrian flag stitched on his thobe, so.
That was an exaggeration, but I'm not saying that neither is wrong, by the way. I'm again, this is just a conversation. I'm trying to pick your brains.
Yeah.
I'm trying to pick your brains because is there a do we differentiate between a quote unquote Muslim country, regardless of the fact that how people or the leadership of that country is, versus a non-Muslim country? Like, you know what I'm saying?
I think it depends. So the thing with Nather is, like, I'm just Nather. We're gonna use an example.
Good point. American flag. I know a lot of people. I'll say this. I know a lot of people that would frown if I rocked an American flag pin on my blazer. Like, I'm sab. American ban gaya.
The American flag represents like war on Muslim countries. I don't know. Like,
yeah, but I'm American, bro. The American flag may represent something else. See, this is what it is. Everyone has a different understanding of what that American flag is. Again, I might be wearing the American flag. I might have an American flag outside my house because I feel patriotic. It's not that I'm worshiping the flag, or it's not that I'm, happy that American troops are going and killing innocent people, right? But yes, I'm American. I'm patriotic. I'm proud to be an American. Sure, right? Now, this is important here. A lot of Americans get this mixed up here. We're patriotic, but we're also proud and we're also stuck up about the fact that we're better than other people. And that's the problem. If I didn't think I'm better than other people, I'm just American. So I'm happy to be American. I don't care. I don't think I'm superior to anybody else. I don't see anything wrong with that. And so again, even in our own cultural, representations, people will frown on that. They'll be okay with donning a Palestinian flag, but for an African American or a convert Muslim to have an American flag is something to frown on. I don't know. I feel that's double standard. I feel that's a bit problematic. Anyway, moving on.
Layla kind of responded to what you just said, though, and I think she has a valid point.
Who responded?
Layla, she said you could. She's like, she said you could represent it to show your love, but someone else is going to see it and think of the wars it took to create it. Why do Republicans/protesters fly the flag in tough times? It's a to be honest, it's a controversial flag. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many problematic things America has done.
Any flag of the world today is controversial. Let's be real. Any flag you take has controversy behind it. I can say the Pakistani flag has controversy behind it. The American flag has controversy behind it. The Indian flag has controversy behind it. The Syrian flag has controversy behind it. The Israeli flag has controversy behind it, right? That's just the reality. There's controversy behind every flag. There was a point in time where those flags were established to prove a sense of nationalism. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You guys get my point though, right?
I totally understand your point. But for me, like, and this conversation is not about me. I guess the question
it's not about you. I was just using that as an example, just to prompt.
My question towards you then becomes, Faisal, for me, as someone who, like, my people are going through tough times, and I wear the flag as a reminder of what they're going through. You know what I'm saying? That's my intention by wearing it, because I know, unfortunately, like, I don't remember what's going on because I'm so enthralled with my own life. I'm so busy with my own life. But by wearing the flag, I sort of stay connected to it in some way. It sounds really dumb when I like say it out loud, like articulate it, but that's sort of my intention behind it. So how does one sort of, I don't know, how does one do that without going through the trouble of like putting on a bracelet or something like that? You know?
I don't know if
I think it also kind of ties. I think it also kind of ties to the intention of what you like, why you're wearing it. So exactly what you said. Real quick, I just wanted to read Layla's comment, Spitting Fire. So she said, it's controversial, but to some immigrants, it represents the struggle it took them to finally live a good and free life, free from prosecution, and to others, it shows white privilege. Exactly. So it just depends on the person doing it and the person observing it. Yeah, so I guess it just depends on that point of view, right? Because like, for instance, like if people who see the American flag like aren't Americans, they're going to have obviously like a different perception of it versus people who are American and like who know, you know, the American traditions and everything, and who realize like there are reasons for why they're putting up the American flag.
Kind of like the whole take the kneel stand. Like I know it's an American flag. I feel like the American flag especially because we've had so many problems here alone with the flag itself, you know, and like the whole Colin Kaepernick, all that stuff was such a huge problem that happened. I don't know. Did I say his name right?
That's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to think like people who did that before in history, like we had an MSA event about like how like their response to it was different than to how, you know, people do it today. So it also depends on the time period, I guess, and just the mentality of the people who lived then.
I respect Kaepernick, by the way. So what I'm saying though, I'm not saying that kneeling. I'm not. That's not the topic that I'm getting into actually. The idea is that so this may be the double standard that exists in our community, that for some people it's okay to don, you know, your country's flag, but for others it's not, right? Because for me, I may be donning it for whatever reason I want to don it. I may you know, have an Indian flag, and an Indian flag to Pakistanis is like, what the hell, right? Why do you have an Indian flag? Right. And for me, it's like, no, we were true to our country. Like we were true to our land. We stuck to our guns. We didn't move. I could say that. I mean, I have a different perspective on it, and people of Pakistan may have a different perspective on it. But I'm saying that I could think that way. And I could be donning my Indian flag. And a lot of people will look down on it like, look at this guy. He's supporting a country that, you know, is oppressive on Muslims. He's supporting a country where Muslims are being lynched. He's supporting a country that, am I supporting the lynching by wearing an Indian flag or having an Indian flag, wristband? Am I supporting the racism against the Muslims in India by supporting the country itself? I don't know. So, that's really, I mean, because for some people, they're like, oh, you're wearing the Syrian flag, then maybe you're supporting Assad, right? So, I mean, I guess we've sort of swerved off topic a bit here and got a little bit more into the details of it. And so maybe we get back to like, let's talk about culture versus Islam now. And
I was just about to say that. So probably,
yeah, maybe we can.
That is a good discussion.
Yeah.
I think we were gonna mention a few more points. If you guys had anything else to say before we move on. Matthew, I think you're on mute.
Kaepernick is a G for sure, man. Kaepernick.
Oh, okay. I was wondering why I was not being freaking. Well, okay. Anyways.
Oh no.
I was trying to talk. I'm like, that was a total like fail. But anyways, what I was trying to say is like before we jump off topic, I just wanted to address a couple of things, which is that culture comes like from culture. We have a lot of things. We have our food from culture. We have our traditional clothing from culture. We have all these things that are so beautiful from our culture, and it's dumb to say that we shouldn't appreciate it, right? We should always take stuff from our culture, and we should always respect like where we came from or where our parents came from, and how we can share our culture with other people. Because a lot of people appreciate it. You know, when you go to different gatherings by Palestinians or Hindus or Indians, sorry, and Pakistani, like you really feel the culture and you feel the vibes, and you really learn to appreciate it more, right? I think people should have more cultural appreciation rather than looking down on cultures. That's one point to make. But another thing is like, no mean to like I say like bash on you, Kiwan, but like so Israel like is not a country, like, you know, like it's a false made country, all right? So
Yeah,
to say
but
there's
I'm
a
saying that
Israeli flag, like
flag though, right? And there's controversy behind that.
yeah, so no, to you to categorize it as a country, to me, like I feel like it's not a country because it's like it's a stolen land, right? It's a stolen culture, right? Everything that Palestinians make, Israelis try to claim it as their own, you know, hummus, whether it's falafel, whether it is whatever it is. So it's really like a taken culture, right? So like
Cultural appropriation.
it's really
I mean,
cultural
I don't
appropriation.
disagree with that. I mean, yeah, I agree with the fact that it is, but
So
I mean,
it was bought out of stolen land, right? And it's been increasing over time. So like as far as yeah, we learned in our social studies classes that it is a country, and yes, that it is has its own area. But in my opinion, it's all stolen, right? Everything about Israel is just like taken, right? Taken. Like so, everything that's made by Israel per se isn't really made by Israel. It's not even like it shouldn't have its own like balance with other countries, and that's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
And I know that comes with controversy, and there's so many things to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm totally on board. I agree with you, but I think that wasn't necessarily the point of the discussion or the conversation. And I don't want to make this about any particular country either. Because then we're off topic again. We want to focus on the idea of culture versus Islam. And so my point of just the different flags and the controversy that exists in different countries, because again, every flag has some level of or some type of controversy that's attached to it. And so the idea was, again, is it okay to don one flag over the other, or one ethnicity over the other? Is it okay just because you're a Muslim country that you can don, a Muslim country flag versus a non-Muslim country, etc. So
just to slide back to what was said very early on, Keon kind of talked about how Islamic rulings are a lot of times based off the culture of the country. So it's actually an interesting story. I was one of my friends is an international student, and we were like talking about nasheed and stuff like that. So then I brought up like this like newish trend of like rap themed nasheeds and things like that, and like different poetry and things like that. And he's an international student. So when I suggested it to him, he's like, bro, that's haram. Like for sure, like there's nothing like what you're explaining to me, it's like definition of haram. And then I was like, bro, listen to it first. And then he's like, okay, cool. And he listened to it, he's like, all right, this is pretty cool. He's like, but if you took this back home, if you took this back to like my country, I think he's from Saudi or he's like Yemeni from Saudi. He's like, if you take it back, the shuyukh are gonna call that haram. Then I was like, you have to think of it as a situation, There's a lot of converts, there's a lot of not like American Muslims that like live or die by rap music. And for them, it's a hard transition to go from like rap music to like Sami Yusuf. So like, and so people started like taking in that rap style and taking it and making nasheeds about it, talking about the Rasulullah, the love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then when he heard it like from that perspective, he was like, yeah, no, that like makes so much more sense. It's a situational thing, and it depends on where you're from. So it's really, I find it pretty cool how Islam takes these things into account.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So I don't know if you guys know this about me. I used to live in New York for a while, and I think that was one of the biggest blessings I've ever got, because if you live over there, there's so many different people, not just Muslims, there's so many different types of ethnicities over there. Then I lived in Oklahoma, which is basically an all-white place. And then I lived in Oshkosh, which it's fairly white, but then the other culture I grew up with over here was the Hmong culture. And I actually became a friend with a person who was Hmong, and she converted to Christianity. And me and her, we would talk about this all the time, where Hmong people, for those you don't know, they come from Laos, and they were forced to come over here after the Vietnam War. And essentially they were oppressed by the United States government as well. And we always talk about this, where we really struggle with kind of like we were talking about before, is that if we identify as American, is that kind of betraying what our parents went through? I think that's just kind of the underlying arch, because sometimes I feel like that's the case, where if people see me or like the way that I dress or the way that I speak, because unfortunately for the longest time I was more comfortable speaking English than Urdu, even though when I was born in Pakistan and Urdu was my first language, yet the language I speak is, I always say this, is of my oppressors, of the colonizers, which is a really crazy thought. So I kind of want to hear what you guys have to say about that.
Man, you know,
I know I brought the conversation back. We can move on if you want to.
no. It's, you know,
That's
if I
fine.
ask a question, I don't want anyone to get offended, man. But like, it has to be asked. It has to be asked. Like, you know, sometimes we have this like, no, I'm not American. You know, you guys want to talk about that attitude? I'm not American. I'm, you know, like we despise America. Why the hell are you here, man?
Or we call them like the Americans as if we're not American.
No, like I ask people like they look. Our parents came here. Let's be real. Our parents came here to find a better life for themselves. True or false?
Yes.
What do you guys think?
Very true.
Absolutely.
Our parents came here because they were looking for a better living, a better way of making money, more success from a I'm going to say this, more success from a worldly perspective. Is that true or false? Am I lying? Am I making this up? Is this false?
No, you're right.
Okay. So they came here because they saw value in this place, right? There's value here. Every country has some wrong and shortcoming and problem. Even the holiest of lands, even the Haramain Sharifain, and where the Haramain Sharifain are, you'll find things that are problematic. True or false?
True.
Right? Okay. So sometimes I get upset when I hear people saying that, yeah, man, screw this place. And, you know, I ain't American, and you know what? Go back to, I mean, really just, yeah, I don't want to sound Republican here. I know I'm in Brookfield.
Red
City.
I'm in Brookfield. I'm in the red city, bro. Not there. I'm in Brookfield, Wisconsin. No, I'm not. That's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to be offensive here, but I'm trying to, like, again, prompt just thoughts. I want to hear you guys on this. I'm not trying to steal this.
Yeah, QN, that's exactly kind of what I was going up. Sorry, did I just cut you off?
Yeah, you did, but
I'm
it's
sorry,
okay.
keep going. I'm so sorry.
Wait, how many people have you cut off? Let's be honest.
That was my sort of, that's my idea, right? That was what I was trying to get to, is that do we, because of this, do we have like this feeling of, hey, I'm Palestinian, or I'm Indian, or I'm Pakistani, or I'm, you know, Syrian, or you know, from Croatia, like wherever you're from, like I'm there first. So you know what you get what I'm saying? You guys get the gist of what I'm trying to present and share?
I can speak to that a little bit, Faisal, because I lived in Jordan for 3 years, and then like coming back to America, there's a huge culture shock. And I remember I had this very, very, very strong anti-American mentality. I had this very strong, like, I'm Muslim mentality. I don't identify. And to this day, I have very, very strong if you know me, you know what I'm about to say. I have sentiment, like a very strong sentiment towards a group of people. But the point that I wanted to say is exactly like you said, at the end of the day, no matter how problematic some of the people that live in the US are, the Constitution of the United States gives us religious freedoms that we don't get in our own countries. Like my dad, literally from the room, he's like, we came here for freedom. Like in Syria, like before, like Bashar al-Assad, Hafez al-Assad.
Facts.
Yeah.
Tell your dad facts.
Yeah. Erdogan said facts. Well, the point is that America gave us religious freedoms that even our own countries couldn't give us, which is very, very unfortunate. And we should be thankful for that. So yeah, I agree with what you said.
So just religious freedom point, and I'm going to stop. I have a classmate from Turkey. I have a classmate who's from Turkey. And this is before Erdogan, right? and whoever, we're not getting into the politics of Turkey right now, but there was a point where in Turkey, if you grew a beard, you were frowned upon. Like you couldn't grow a beard. You couldn't wear hijab in public places. You couldn't wear hijab to school or to work, right? And so when he would go home to Turkey, which is a majority Muslim country, he would shave his beard. Like when from South Africa, when he would go home, he would have to shave his beard. And I'd go and come to this kafir state, and you know, this non-Muslim country. Like I came and I lived, and we practice religion like mashallah, you know. And we have such a beautiful system of religion, of masajid, of teaching and learning, of you know, acceptance of culture. Like if you think about it, they accept our, like in the sense like we're allowed to practice our culture. Like no one stops us.
Yeah,
it's open. And again, that's the beauty of our country. That's the beauty of all the diversity that we have. Anyway.
I think you make a really good point, Qari Noman. So to kind of wrap things up about everything that we just said, we wanted to move on one last point, which is just to kind of give a little background. For a lot of people, and I think Qari Noman kind of touched on this a little bit, they're more afraid of their culture and like expectations and what people in their cultures would think about them and kind of perceive them. So they're more afraid than that than they are of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and just their religious obligations in general, which I think is really unfortunate. So what can we essentially do to make sure that we don't fall into that hole where we are prioritizing our culture over religion or in general?
Yeah, but you cut off a little bit.
You cut off. Your voice is gone.
Heba, come in.
Blink twice if you need help.
You just froze.
Did I freeze?
Oh,
What was the last thing I said?
You cut off. You have to repeat what you
I
said.
cut off. The whole thing?
No, not the whole thing.
Just towards the end of it.
Just towards the end. So I guess just how can we avoid not falling into like that hole where we're more afraid of our cultural expectations as Muslims, or I'm sorry, cultural expectations when whatever our cultures are versus our Muslim obligations, and how to kind of prioritize what's more important.
I think the first thing we need to ask ourselves, because one thing I got from this conversation is, what is our culture? Like, kind of to go back to what Kion was saying in the beginning, when I thought of culture versus Islam, I was thinking of my own like Pakistani culture. I wasn't really thinking about the American aspect, you know. And now that he's talking about it, I'm like, man, now I got another big identity crisis because I don't know my culture anymore. Like, obviously I know it, but I think we need to go back, and before we even like, I mean, not like as a podcast, I mean, just individually, we all need to sit down and be like, okay, is my culture where I was born or is it where I was raised? And even so, like, regardless of all that, your religion needs to come before either of those. And I know that Surf has mentioned this, like way earlier in the chat, how we're more inclined to our own people. But in America, we are, if we're talking about cultures and we're bringing the Western culture into our lives, we're technically all the same people culturally in one way or another. We were raised in America. That's a huge part of our similar cultural experiences. And not to bash on Saddam School, but to slightly bash on Saddam School, I went there and that cultural experience was just terrible for me. I'm sorry, like, I was Pakistani. I didn't look it, or at least I was told I didn't look it for most of my life. And I didn't know whether I wanted to be Pakistani or be Arab. And I neglected my whole entire Muslim identity in the process, you know. And I come to college and it's a little different because it's mostly brown people than Arab people. It's a different, like, switched over, you know. And now I'm at this point where I'm like, man, like, there's so much cultural problems, so many cultural clashes, whether that be sexism, racism, nationalism, whatever it may be. But at the end of the day, like, we need to remember that we're all Muslim, you know, we're all raised in America. We're all struggling to figure out who the heck we are. And like, I don't even know if I'm answering the question at this point, to be quite honest. But, you know, with religious clashes and cultural clashes and everything in between, and this like super thin line between it, you know, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to go back to last episode's topic and to bring religion into all of this once more, is that he would treat everyone the same. You know, it doesn't really matter about all the talk on my notifications. It doesn't really matter about whether you're Pakistani, whether you're Indian, whether you're Syrian, Palestinian, Lebanese, Jordanian, like Italian, I don't care, you know, like at the end of the day, we're all one ummah. And we need to remember that that comes way before whatever nationality, whatever ethnicity we are. that's just, like I said, I don't even know if I answered the question, but I feel like that just had to be said because the whole time QN's talking, all I could think was, yo, what is my culture now? You know, and then it kind of just hit me that.
Just the whole time QN is talking.
I think that's a good point though, because that's like the first step, you know, because if you don't even know what your culture is, how can you compare it to your religion? So I think that's definitely a good point to make.
Can I just request those who are viewing while we're having this discussion and going around, if they can throw in from personal perspective, they can throw in what are some things growing up or even now that they see is cultural from their perspective and that it clashes with their religion and it's something that really bothers them. So in your perspective, something from religion that something from our culture that clashes with religion that sometimes our own parents or people of our culture sort of emphasize or really want us to do or whatever else. So if you guys can throw that in while we have our conversation, we can get to that stuff then afterwards, because I think I want a part of the segment to be also, if that's cool with you guys, to be sort of about, hey, what are all those cultural things that we used to do or our parents used to tell us that we realize, okay, they actually have no basis in religion. But again, going back to that very principle that I mentioned in the beginning, as long as it doesn't make something halal haram and make something haram halal, there's no problem with it. And yeah, so we'll come back to that. Whistling.
so much whistling. I heard picking up the rug before you get up, like to avoid things, yawning without putting your hand over your mouth, brings like the shaitan like apparently pisses in your mouth or something. I don't know. There's so many things that I've heard that are like absurd, and also, although they have a positive intention behind them, like to pick up the rug before you get up, obviously just be more organized and pick up after yourself, or don't whistle, like there's a slight meaning behind each one, but overall I feel like cultures there's so much good to take out of them, right? Being American, also being Palestinian, I have to take what's best from both. I have to take what's best from the American culture, I have to take what's best from the Palestinian culture, and try to build myself as a person, because obviously in Palestinian culture there's negatives, and also obviously also in American culture there's many negatives, but the point being, everybody has to really revolve themselves around the good in their life, and also tie it back to religion, tie it back to what's right and what you think is best to make yourself closer to Allah,
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing oh God. So there's some people in my family who, I don't want to call them old fashioned, but they're a little old fashioned, where they're like, you know what? Just get married, you're fine. And I'm going to bring up the sexism point again, because I'm a little disappointed we're not discussing this a little more. Maybe it's just we're growing up in the United States and maybe it's a little less noticeable here, but back home, I mean, there were crazy things that I've heard that, it's okay for a husband to beat up his wife if she's not listening to him, or that she basically needs to worship the feet around his feet. I mean, there was one hadith where I know people, and Qari Noman, you probably know which one I'm going to talk about, where it's like Prophet ﷺ said that people can't do sajda to their husband, but they could, if something like that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
If sajda to a human being was permissible, I would have told the wife to make sajda to the husband. That hadith.
Yeah. And that's something where I'll hear that. And here's the thing, it's that wasn't a ruling though at the end of the day. And it's really frustrating because sometimes when we mix the two lines between religion and culture, I definitely think the way that women are treated is something that we need to address.
Yeah. See, the thing is that, again, sorry, but I want to mention this thought while Nadia still mentioned that point, is that a lot of times, again, this is a problem because we tend to understand these ahadith and verses culturally as well. And so, we look at this like, yes, so this is what it means, right? So we take a cultural perspective on those ahadith and those verses of the Quran as well, which is problematic, at least. You have to understand those verses and those the ahadith from the perspective that the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us and why he said it and what was the purpose of him saying something like that. So that's what we generally miss, though.
Yeah, and just speaking on that, I mean, what I have noticed is that sometimes people purposely look for an ayah or a hadith or something to match what they're thinking, but then they don't look at the whole entire context of it. And then at the end of the day, I mean, we know how the Prophet ﷺ is. He was by nature a very compassionate, a very kind man, and there was no way that he beat his wives or anything, which sometimes I think we forget to take that out of context. There was actually one small thing I was thinking of when we were talking about, I guess, our identity crisis living in the United States, is that when I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, I seriously think every single Muslim should read it, because that, I guess, put things into perspective of what it does mean to be a Muslim in the United States. He was obviously talking about it and what it's like to be a Black Muslim in the United States, but there's still some points that I think we all can take from reading that book. So that's just my one book recommendation from this. So I'm good.
The point that I wanted to, Nadia, your point was really, really good. Thank you so much for mentioning that. It's really important to mention that. The one thing that I wanted to mention is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. I have it pulled up here so I don't mistake it. He said, "لا فرق بين عربي ولا أعجمي إلا بالتقوى." So there's no difference between an Arab and a non-Arab except in taqwa. And this is such like a important thing, because the Arabs at the time were such nationalistic people and rigid and stringent people. Like they were so rude to people of other cultures. And not just that, to their slaves too. They were extremely rude and disrespectful to their slaves. They would make fun of people for being non-Arabs and things like that. And then the Prophet ﷺ came and totally abolished that in a way that's never been seen before. So subhanAllah, like if the Prophet ﷺ, our role model, came and he abolished all of this, and yet we are still clinging on to these tiny little nationalistic thoughts and ideals and beliefs, even though like we identify as Muslims first and foremost, yet here we are holding on to these nationalistic beliefs. So it's like, what are our priorities at this point in time? Like we really got to look deep into our heart and figure that out. And I wanted to address Mahmoud Aish. Mahmoud Aish asked a really good question. He said, how do you change a person's culture to bring them back to Islam? And then he answered it himself in a way that I couldn't answer it. Like he did it perfectly. He said, closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the key. Like the more you get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more you realize that the only true culture that you should identify with, or that you even would want to identify with, is the culture of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So
man,
oh, fire, bro.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the comments, and it's awesome because literally when it comes to culture and Islam, the number one thing on people's minds is marriage. So I love it.
It's true.
I love it that someone finally brought this up, because that is usually the number one point of contention that so many people have, is the marriage aspect of things, and the cultural aspect of getting married. It's so that's a really something that we can really get into. I think it'll be fun. It'll be a fun topic.
we should do a topic about that.
Well, we are college students, so
Yeah, everyone's thinking about marriage now. Yeah.
I think
Right.
overall with the question that's going on right now is we're talking about like how can we prevent like our culture to like overtake our religion. And for me personally, I realized that I was more raised with Islamic beliefs over more cultural beliefs, and I'm very thankful for that. And I think it's very important for you to like be willing to go outside your box. And I think it goes to what Sir Fraz was mentioning way before. And I'm not saying he's wrong. He's perfectly correct. He said, naturally, people are inclined to be around the people that they're comfortable with, that they're used to. And I think that's fine. That's perfectly fine. But once you're stuck inside that kind of atmosphere, you lose sight of what's outside of it. And I think like if we're too comfortable and we get too comfortable around a certain people, like our generations after are going to be comfortable with that same group as well. And overall, that's just going to lead to an overall kind of trend of people becoming more kind of ignorant to other cultures. And then when they like are put into a situation where they're not like, they're around a different culture or a different type of person, it just becomes a little bit awkward. You're like, I'm a good person. I don't mean to be racist. I've been around so many of my own types of people, Desi, Palestinian, and that I don't understand it. So I think the key thing is making like being aware of like the people you're around and constantly trying to seek out different things to learn from different types of people. And that's one thing. Another thing is have someone that you can rely on that can help keep you on the right track. For me personally, everything always goes back to the type of people you're around, the company you choose to be around with. If you choose to be around people that are cultural over Islamic, then obviously that's something that's gonna happen. But if you have someone that's regularly pushing you to follow Islam, like have good thoughts about people, treat people properly, and like follow the hadith that Nader said. If you have people that act upon that, then there's nothing else you can do. There's hadith that constantly mention I don't know the wording exactly, but it's like the brotherhood, something about the perfume shop, and your friends are like a perfume shop or something like that. And if you walk through it, you're gonna get that smell. T1 can address that hadith exactly, but yeah, I think it always goes back to the type of people you're around.
Right. I could. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm gonna laugh for you, inshallah.
I could not have like agreed with Taha like anymore. Like what Taha was saying was 100. Like I can relate to that in my life like 100% because growing up, all I was around was Palestinian culture, right? Being Palestinian, coming here as Palestinian in high school, freshman year of high school, all I was around was Palestinians. That's it. No other culture. Like I would not like intertwine with anybody else. Like, and it wasn't until I got to college where I really like started to talk and be friends with other people, and I actually found the best of my friends like to be like multicultural, like people outside my culture, you know, not Palestinians, you know, everybody that today that I really like to surround myself around are not Palestinian. And the truth is that like although like I do like being around my Palestinian like culture, it's and Palestinian people, but I feel like over here in Wisconsin, at least, or Milwaukee, like I feel like people that are stronger in their religion are people that are majorly not Palestinian. So like a lot of people that are based like Taha, for instance, like or Nader, you know, they're one of my really good friends, and I like being around them. And like Taha was saying, you know, like being around good company also rubs off on you. And then going back to what I said a couple like episodes ago about Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which is al-mar'u ala dini khalilih. So you basically whoever you're around is whoever you're getting your influence from. And I think Q1 can you know, maybe say, you know, it's called translate that to English. I can't directly translate that.
There was a bunch of Jazakallah khairan to everybody who's watching and for all of your participation in the comments. I think that this is making so much more meaningful. So yeah, I really appreciate all the amazing comments and questions and just reflections that you guys are sharing. I wanted to, before I answer some of the questions that came in, I want you to think about this, right? The Prophet ﷺ was in a culture of what? Guys, I want to think about it. What type of culture did the Prophet come from?
Culture.
Huh? Let's think about Mecca. Think about Mecca before he was given prophethood. Think about the culture that he grew up in. Think about the culture of the people of that area.
Is it like the era of Jahiliyyah or how it's typically?
Like, you know, when we talk about the Jahiliyyah, the era of Jahiliyyah, they say that about Arabs that nobody wanted to rule the Arabs. They were such jahil. There were the Jahiliyyah. There was so much evil, so much wrong. The Prophet is born in that culture. The Prophet grows up in that culture. And we find yet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam takes from that culture that which is good, right? I can't stress how much good there is in American culture. There's a lot of good, right? But then there's also bad. There's also bad to it. The Prophet, you know, talks about the bad. And so here's a really important part, culture, right? Because the Prophet ﷺ, he in his time made sure that he told us not to imitate other religious groups in the way that we do things. And he was very particular about this. And so the Prophet ﷺ was very, very particular that, hey, listen, yes, we understand that there's certain cultures that we have that it's okay. And the Prophet took that culture in because, again, it was not making anything halal or making something haram, which was halal. So you know what? So it was okay. However, there were things that the Prophet said, no, this is off limits because this is clear-cut imitation. This is off limits because this is, this is from their religious culture. So now religious culture versus social culture is different. Let's differentiate between that now. Religious culture versus social culture. So the Prophet was very strong about, hey, listen, we're not going to follow their religious culture. We're not going to follow their religious culture. And so this idea of, hey, listen, we're, in America, we have American culture. We're Muslims growing up in America. Is it wrong for me to take in American culture? Like, so I was thinking about like the whole wedding conversation that's happening. I don't know if we can really get into it, but like, for those of your parents who are still very, very traditional, whether you're Desi or Arab, if you wore a white dress, as is very common for American women to wear at their weddings, would not your family and would not your people tell you that you've become Americanized? Would this not be something that people would frown on, right?
Yeah.
Yes or no? No?
I can't speak on this. I don't know.
Oh yeah, Qari, okay, it's really funny because me and my mom were talking about this. Not that I'm getting married anytime soon, but she's like, she wants like a big extravagant wedding. I want a really small one. And I said, yeah, like I don't care what I wear. Like it doesn't matter. I can wear like a white dress. And the second I said that, she looked at me. She's like, "Ab Angrezi ban gyo?" And I said, here we go. And I had to listen to the whole rant. So yeah, QN.
So I mean, coming back to that. So now I can, like, the people ask this question all the time. What is Islamic clothing look like? What is Islamic clothing? Like, what is Islamic clothing supposed to look like? Is it how long is supposed to be, how this or how that? No, like, am I wearing an Islamic garment here? Is this considered to be a Islamic garment? No, this is a garment that fits the Islamic guidelines of what clothes should look like. Okay, that could be your red gharara sharara dress that you wear on your wedding, or it could be a white dress that you wear. As long as it fits within the guidelines of how a person should be dressing, nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with it, right? So, why are you smiling, man? Someone listening in?
No. It's a long story. Sorry, continue.
Okay, so the idea of this is Islam, and this is actually a big thing with like those from the subcontinent, like people who are like, that look like me and maybe come from my, from my tradition of Islamic knowledge, will be like, no, you have to wear like this, like your thobe has to be like this, or your kurta pajama has to be like this, and this is like how your shalwar qamis has to be, and it has to be like this length, that has to go past your ankles, your knees, and it has to be, slit, and it has like a bunch of conversations about like this is Islamic and this is not Islamic. Yes, there's something that we could find that can be more, falls within the guidelines. But I can wear, so like I was thinking about this. I was like, man, if I one day, now because everyone usually sees me in a thobe, if I one day stood up on the mimbar, on the pulpit behind me, in a suit, right? How would people view me differently? Would people view me differently because now I've gone from wearing a thobe to wearing a Angrezi clothes, Americanized, imam, liberal, suit, even though that suit falls within the actual guidelines of our deen. Okay, can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, you like froze for like
Yeah.
a second, and then everyone froze. So I don't know if it was just me or not.
It said my internet. I got a thing that says my internet is unstable.
Can you tell us Islamic ruling on wearing ties?
I mean, you guys ever hear the Islamic rule is it's a cross? You guys ever hear that? A cross, wearing a cross on your. You're wearing a cross on your body. Astaghfirullah, you're gonna hell. Nah, man, there's nothing like that. Astaghfirullah. There's nothing wrong with wearing a tie.
BMW actually means
wear a tie. Again, look, a culture plays a role here, right? In some cultures you have the thobe, and then you have the waistcoat, and then you have the ghutra, and then you have the little thing that goes on top of that. Everyone has a different type of way of dressing, right? As long as it's not extravagant, it falls within the guidelines of Sharia for man and woman, whoever, it's fine. It's permissible. Coming back to the hadith, I know I went all over, and you guys are talking a whole bunch. Sorry. Now there. You want to say something? Looks like. I'm looking at these comments and I'm just like, man, they're telling you to shut up. Okay.
It's all good.
There was a question about the hadith that we talked about. Nadia brought up the hadith about, hey, sajda cheer. So Now, you have to understand that in the prophetic literature that we have, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam addresses both men and women. And so when he's addressing the women, he's making them realize the importance of fulfilling the right of the husband. It's the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was using this rhetorical statement. Like he does not say that your husband is like God. No. But the Prophet is trying to put into the hearts of the women that it is extremely important for you to fulfill the rights of your husband. Now, this may have been because maybe there was a culture of not taking husband seriously at that time. Maybe there was a culture of being ungrateful to husband. But regardless of what that situation may have been, the Prophet is emphasizing the importance of having respect for your husband, because your husband has a lot of rights upon you. Now, that doesn't mean it's not found the other way around. The Prophet also addresses husbands. Literally, he uses the final khutbah of his life, known as the final sermon, to address women's rights. He uses that khutbah to talk about how you need to take care of those the women who are under your supervision, those who you're responsible for, those who you're married to, and those who may be your mothers and your sisters. The Prophet is emphasizing this throughout his seerah and throughout his life, emphasizes the importance of respecting and honoring and giving women their rights. And so again, like I mentioned, sometimes we take that hadith to be very in a cultural tone. Like if the Arab or Desi took that, look, husband is superior and you are inferior, and that we are the best and you are servants. You do what we tell you to do. That's not that's not what my Habib taught. I am confident that that's not what my Habib Sallallahu taught. I am confident that that was not the approach of my Prophet Sallallahu. Rather, his approach was to teach the importance of fulfilling the rights of each other. Anyway, go back.
Okay, inshallah. So I guess to kind of wrap up what we were saying and to go off of what QN was kind of touching on, it is obvious that there are some practices within some cultures that can honestly become a way in which people can be like oppressed in terms of like injustice within a certain culture. So obviously Nadia was mentioning like sexism within different cultures, and I think that's very evident in different traditions. But I guess it is kind of important to bring that full circle and just recognize that, yes, like even though we might be, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, good.
Okay, sorry. Even though we might be like disconnected in a way, or it might seem that even though we're from different countries, that, it's like us versus them, that we're still able to, come back together, because Islam, as we mentioned in the beginning, is just a way that, we bring in so many different diverse cultures together. And just like the way that we pray, for instance, like we're all from different ethnicities and socioeconomic statuses, and we're standing side by side. We're able to, have essentially like practice a religion all together, regardless of what our backgrounds are, which I think is something that's really important to recognize. Even though that our cultures may clash sometimes, we're not able to distinguish the two. I do want to kind of end it off there, guys, and thank you guys so much for watching this episode. We do want to remind you that, did you want to say one more thing, Kyon?
Oh wait, I didn't know we're wrapping up. I thought you guys had a bunch of stuff to say.
It's kind of getting late.
Oh, it's getting late. I'm sorry, guys. I'm my bad. I took up all this speaking. No, man, please say something. I'm gonna feel bad if you guys don't say something.
Didn't you say that you lost your voice when this all started? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Huh?
That's a good point.
Sorry, man. All right.
That's all good. We wanted to remind you guys that there is an Instagram live going on tomorrow. Remind me of the time. Is it 10 or 11 p.m.?
11.
I don't remember. It's 11 p.m. So definitely watch you guys with the notification if you're already following us on Instagram. Our handle will be in the description below. There is one more update that we have, and that is to make sure that you guys definitely put a like on this video and subscribe if you haven't already, because we noticed that we have more viewers and subscribers. So subscribe, hit that button, and click on the notification bell icon to get any updates on our channel whenever we go live. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching. You guys had an amazing amount of participation in the comments. We really appreciate that, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode.
Can I request something though? There's so much more that we could talk about. There's so much more that I have on my mind.
The whole
And
We
it's
could
like,
go all day about this
And we
topic,
got a
though.
part
I know, but like there's so many different aspects to it. There's so many different like angles to talk about it. That really, man, I don't even think we did justice to this topic. I think we're just getting our feet wet so far.
It's a very
And so yes, maybe we can stop
It
now,
is,
but
yeah.
can we sort of get this engagement going on at least on IG, keep this this engagement, whatever, how you want to do in the story, maybe ask questions, and maybe we can answer it in our lives or things like that. I don't know. But anyway,
This topic
That's
because
a good point, because there are. Oh no, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead, Nader.
yeah, I was just saying we could do a part 2 because this is a very, very important topic. And we, like you said, we didn't really go into it as much as we should have.
We could
Actually, I think we should,
do a
like,
part 2. We could do a part 2.
No, I think we should just like stem off, because we had so many things like marriage, like racism, all this stuff, but we like superficially touched everything because there's so much that goes under this whole umbrella. So I feel like it'd be better if we just like use those bigger topics and then talked about them like full detail. But I guess that depends on what else everyone else thinks, us and the
We
audience.
can.
So we should
put a poll,
Comment
inshallah.
if you want to hear a part 2.
Comment, yeah.
Yeah, if you want to hear a
Yeah,
part
or
2,
the-
at least,
definitely.
maybe.
Wait a couple of seconds for that.
Thumbs up.
Also, don't forget, guys, that we're gonna have our next episode on Thursday, inshallah, and we'll be deciding that based on the poll. So definitely, if you guys want to have an input on what the topic will be, definitely vote on the polls on our Instagram page.
Yeah.
Let's see those comments.
There's some people saying take it to Insta. Some people saying maybe it could be broken down into parts, addressing different aspects.
Any episode. Some great ideas. All
So
right.
We should drop a poll.
Mile wide and
as a group, and then we'll update you guys later.
Yeah,
Part
inshallah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
part
Inshallah.
IG
Everyone wants to hear about that culture, man, because we didn't get into like the man, like, you know, all the little small things like, hey, you got to fold the prayer mat, you know, like shaitan is in like, come on, man, we gotta do all that fun stuff too, man.
I'm interested in where that came from. Honestly, I never heard that until like this year.
The
My
folding the
favorite one is when you stretch after you eat. The food goes into like a dog's belly.
You guys ever hear the one about the scissors that you just? Well, that's a lot of. No, this all goes into like superstition.
What
This all
about-
goes into like superstition
I
and
think
stuff.
the favorite one I was
Anyway,
told was that if you
Maybe, like I'm sorry, Hiba, you gave like your whole spiel about like, hey, we're ending, and
It's
we're back.
okay. Nobody. It's all good.
This is literally every Desi leaving someone's house. We're like, we say goodbyes and then we speak for another 10
That's
minutes.
so true. You goodbyes, you stand up, then at the door, then at the
This is
car.
our
I
culture,
feel
yaar.
it.
Our culture is after we say salam, we speak for another 20 minutes and then we say salam. I stick to that
It's
culture.
okay.
Stick to that culture. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not making anything halal haram here or haram halal. Right, Nader? Nader looks tired and annoyed, and so I'm gonna stop.
Just from that, well, we all want to hear what you were gonna say though.
Look, man, our fans are talking about not ending it, man. You guys.
Yeah, they all want
I'm the one
part
that says,
2.
I'm tired and I've been here all day and I gotta go home and I gotta eat dinner.
When you
still.
gotta eat,
One has to go back.
Got somebody waiting
your
again?
wife's gonna text you, be like, "Hey, are you okay?" And then
No, my wife's like, I'm gonna sleep, man. You do whatever you
She's like, I'm not waiting up for you.
do whatever
Not
you want.
anymore.
I'm gonna sleep now. Anyway.
All right,
I
so you
heard
sure you
it's-
didn't want to mention anything else,
Owls are
Q1?
evil and bad luck for some. Yeah. Anyway, let's end this off, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala
Okay,
bless all of
inshallah.
us and make this a blessed gathering for us and allow us to find, allow us to find our true value. May Allah allow us to understand our true value and understand who we are and understand that our value doesn't come from where we come from. Our value isn't attached to our ethnicity. Our value isn't attached to how we look. Our value isn't attached to our skin color. Our value is not attached to our hair texture. Our value is not attached to our complexion. Our value is not attached to our language or the way that we speak. Our value is attached to our faith. And that's what makes us amazing, or that's what makes us not amazing in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. Verily the most honorable of you are those who are most God-fearing, who have the most conscious of Allah, who are most God conscious. So may we be those people, and may we be those leaders who actually help guide our generations and our people and our young people to understanding what it means to be an American Muslim, and what it means to lead as an American Muslim, and what it means to be proud to be an American Muslim, and use the great blessings and advantages that we have to our benefit. Like someone said in this comment, that the whole world follows the lead of America. we have the ability and opportunity to step up as Muslims and to be an example for Muslims all over the world. Just because Muslims are looked up, just because Americans are looked up to, we have that power, we have that ability. Let us wake up and take advantage of the beautiful position that we are in and actually help lead the Muslims of this world in understanding who God is and how that should be, how they should be living their lives, inshallah. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Jazakumullah khairan once again. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Go
Sorry,
off.
go.
Go off.
Do we have like a leaving pose?
Or it could be the thumbnail.
Look at you, Ed. No.
I'm going back to screenshot that.
Wait, or like the light bulb, the arrow.
This is
What?
boomerang.
Is this still on?
And this is still on. Oops, sorry, my bad.
Man, we're embarrassing ourselves here.
I'm embarrassing myself here. I'm gonna end this.
That's
I
true.
forgot to stop the stream.
Alright.
لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله.
We
إنا
just-
لله وإنا إليه راجعون.
Astaghfirullah, man.
إنا